What's up, everybody? Bandit and Chad here for another Taco Tuesday. So over the weekend, we did make it down to Black Mountain OHV in Harlan, Kentucky. I was fortunate enough to finally take the Land Cruiser out. We will have a full video dedicated to all of that and how it went down. But needless to say, we did make it back in one piece and everything is okay. But Chad actually drove down in the Tacoma. You didn't do a whole lot of four-wheeling, really.
Not really, no.
But we did get a good test here on these new tires.
Right, so as he said, this truck was not off-roaded at all this past week, and really, I mean, more or less, I was driving up the access road to our campground, which we have determined actually is harder than some of the trails that we did go on. But I did not put the truck in four-wheel drive really at any point this weekend because it wasn't necessary. But the main reason for that is because the truck is not really built for those types of trails. There are a lot of areas where I would have definitely high-centered because of the long wheelbase, and not having a lift doesn't really help with any of that, though I'm sure the tires would have performed just fine had the truck been built for those types of trails. But the main thing to talk about is how the truck did driving down on the road. So it was about a 4-hour trip straight there and straight back. So I did get about 8 hours of highway and road time on these tires. So I feel like I can make a pretty accurate assessment of how they feel on the road. So I am running about 36 to 37 PSI on all of these tires. And when going down the road, that's a pretty decent highway PSI to run. Obviously, when you do go off-road, you do lower the PSI, so you have a much more comfortable ride and you take advantage of all of the tread that you can. So on the road, the tires, and my buddy Bryce that we did have with us this weekend, he can attest to this, they don't really sound a whole lot louder, or really not much at all, than the stock tires that came on the TRD Sport, which was really surprising. And you know, that was one of the things that I did read about these Falken tires. They're very quiet on the road and have very good road manners. The only time that you really notice any sound is if you're really coming into a turn really fast. You definitely hear and kind of feel that sidewall kind of getting pressed down a little bit and gripping as you go throughout that turn, and it's definitely a noticeable sound. That is really the only time that I noticed any louder road driving with these tires. One other thing to note is while you are driving on the road with larger tires, your vehicle, your engine, your transmission have to work a little bit harder because it is a heavier tire, and you do have a different rotations per mile, and I don't remember what those are exactly, but basically you have to give it a little bit more to get up to speed. With these tires in particular, it didn't really seem like I had to give it a whole lot more because the tire is really only an inch taller than what I had on here prior to. One last thing that I will note about these tires that I'm really impressed with is the braking in the dry. You know, when you get these all-terrain tires, you don't really care too much about how it's going to act on the pavement. Of course, that is really important, but what you're looking at the tires more for how it's going to handle off-road and what more you're going to be able to get out of it versus the street bias tire that you did have on the truck before. But just kind of noting that with these new tires, braking was phenomenal. It almost seemed better than the tires that were on here beforehand, but that probably had something to do with the fact that the tires are brand new.
Right, some things to keep in mind. So far we've only had roughly 500 miles or so. It was roughly 200 miles to get to Kentucky, 200 miles back. So we have roughly 500 miles on these tires. Obviously, as the tires continue to break in, they will begin to wear more and more, making more sound and everything like that. But initial impressions, I'm very impressed, just like Chad. They are very quiet, just cruising around town. We'll get on the interstate up here a little bit so you can hear exactly what that's like inside the cabin. But one thing to keep in mind when you are looking at new tires, a lot of all-terrain tires and mud tires change in their sidewall and rubber compounds and everything else. So a lot of off-road tires are only offered in a load range E. These tires are offered in a lighter load range. And one thing that really is important, I mean, regardless of whatever load range you have, you're never going to max the tires out. You know, load range E can be used for, you know, heavy duty trucks even, and that's just to support the weight and tire pressure that they have to carry and everything like that. On a lighter truck like a 4Runner or even other vehicles like on a lighter truck like a Tacoma or lighter vehicles like a 4Runner, you know, you're never really going to be pushing the true load range of them. But a higher load range will have a thicker sidewall. It will be a heavier tire, and it will, you know, be a little bit more robust and everything like that. When I was doing my tire research, a load range E tire compared to these Falkens that, again, are the lighter ones, do run roughly 8 to 10 pounds heavier, and that's just unsprung weight, meaning that there's no
it's hard to explain.
Right.
It's just the weight that your vehicle has to move, I guess, on the axles, as in it's not supported by the springs. Correct?
Right. So basically, you know, everything that would be in your cabin or in your bed has the springs to dampen that. However, like Chad was saying, when you're just adding weight to the corners in your wheels and tires, your suspension just has to work extra hard to absorb those impacts. You know, if you would hit a bump or something like that, that's more force that's going to transition up into the cabin that your springs will have to try to absorb and that sort of thing. So, you know, all of this is important stuff to kind of weigh. You know, obviously these tires are a pretty good deal at roughly $125 a tire. A lot of, say, the KO2s are another very popular tire. They're roughly $200, but KO2s are only offered in that load range E. They are a heavier tire, and while those load range E tires can wear pretty slowly and still offer a pretty good ride, it is still another thing to factor in there. So here is another look at those Falken Wild Peak AT3W tires. And again, they are fairly aggressive for an all-terrain. They have a really nice sidewall here. They have pretty deep tread, and it should be good whether you're in the mud or whatever else. Panning around here to the front, again, there is no rubbing. We are on the factory TRD off-road wheels, so there's not a huge offset, not as much as what you'd find in a lot of aftermarket wheels. But so far, there is no rubbing. They are riding great, and everything is working out just fine there. So as we're merging onto the interstate here, we're pulling up the miles per gallon that the truck reads out here in the center gauge in your display here, and it says it's on average 19.1 miles to the gallon. Now, some of this is a little bit skewed. Again, with these tires being slightly larger, they are roughly 2 miles per hour off at 65 miles per hour. So all of that will relay into your odometer and your fuel economy numbers as well. We will try to calculate this and give you a more updated impression on this at some point. But currently, again, it does say 19.1. A lot of that was, again, the interstate driving. Some of that was around town and everything like that. So it is probably somewhat mixed fuel economy, I would say.
Yeah, definitely kind of mixed, but as he was saying, you know, it's going to be a little bit off. I guess the true way to really calculate your fuel economy is kind of, you know, fill it up, and then when you go to fill your tank again, do the math and how, you know, how many miles you went versus how many gallons you put in the tank.
But again, your odometer would be a certain percentage off.
Right.
So that is another thing to consider. But we are going down the interstate here at roughly 60 miles an hour. It is a pretty windy day, so that's going to add to some cabin noise as well. But overall, it is still a very pleasant ride in here. It's not loud. You don't have the kind of mud tire drone where it's constantly you know, beating you up or anything like that. It still is a very livable truck for daily driving. Absolutely. And I would feel very confident if these were my tires as well. And that kind of brings up another point. I am still shopping around for tires. I've heard through the grapevine that Cooper is working on another tire that is a slightly more aggressive all-terrain, and that's kind of why I've been holding off. Cooper, with their Discoverer line of tires, does offer a all-terrain currently, but it's not very aggressive per se compared to these. I don't really want to go all the way up to the ST Maxes because they are a considerably heavier tire and they are offered only in the load range E. So I am still weighing that. If you have any thoughts or updates on those tires, I would love to hear it and really would appreciate your all's thoughts on those. But overall, a really great weekend. Again, we will have an off-road video coming up, hopefully within the next week or so. It is a lot of editing when we go down there for a whole weekend. We have a lot of clips that are great. We have a lot of clips that are not so great.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, when you're filming, you know, to get some of those angles, you have to get in some of the craziest places off of these trails. And some of these trails that we go on, kind of off topic on a bit of of a tangent, but you have to like go up onto the side of the cliff wherever it is, because a lot of these trails do kind of tend to be cut kind of almost down through the ground, it seems, and you're holding on to vines and roots and you're almost sliding down the hill, but you do all of this in the name of getting good footage and, you know, these great angles that we can try and get. But yeah, overall it was a very fun weekend, and hopefully we can find some good footage.
That's right. So we do still have a lot of updates coming. I am still working on my modification that came from RCI. That's been a little bit of a challenge because of the crazy weather we've been having with painting the thing that I got. So that may offer you a little bit of an idea as to what I got, but hopefully we'll be coming out with a video on that here within the next week or two as well. It is taking a lot of painting time, more than I was really expecting. So hopefully we can get that squared away here before too long. But thank you all very much for watching. Have a fantastic week, everybody. We'll catch you next time.
See you guys.